have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was me and Rank. I mean, how can you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast.
And welcome to the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast. This is episode 64. Happy Cinco de Mayo, and we've got a special show for you today. Joining us, please welcome to the show the talented Mr.Roto, the favorite agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., the New York Times bestseller, ESPN senior fantasy analyst, host of the Fantasy Football Show, Syracuse alum, and maybe the most important of all these, soccer dad, Matthew Berry. How you doing, Matthew?
I'm good, by the way. The Yellow Jackets, the under 10 girls soccer team that I'm the assistant coach for. We are 3-0-1. Thank you very much. We are undefeated 4 games in the season, and you know when you're coaching girls under 10, that's the most important thing, right? Wins and losses.
That's what it is.
It's not teamwork. It's not fundamentals. It's not having a good time. It's not just getting out and running around. Oh no, it is wins and losses. So, yeah, we're teaching them right.
Get those doubles.
It's funny because all of us, I think, here have kind of coached our kids in some sport, and even the young age, you might not keep score. There might not be a scoreboard, but each and every one of those kids knows what the score of the game is, no matter what.
Oh yeah, and listen, I mean, like listen, we play the kids all over. We play them at different positions. We try them, we rotate everyone in. We make sure everyone gets equal playing time. But I want to win. Like, I mean, there's no trophy at the end. And, we are it's a buddy of mine. We coach together. Our daughters are friends. It's the second year that we've coached together. And we're doing all the things you're supposed to do as coaches. But secretly inside, I want to win. You know what I mean? I probably cheer a little too hard when we score. And so, it's definitely fun. I'm enjoying it, no question.
Nice.
I feel that way when I coach my kids in baseball as well, because I have a 12-year-old and then an 8-year-old that both play baseball. I coach the 8-year-old. The 8-year-old, it's coach pitch. It's nice and easy down the middle, and I get way too excited when somebody on the other team strikes out, and I have to remind myself, like, wait, you're cheering for an 8-year-old to strike out. Don't do that. Don't do that.
It's a little much. It's definitely a little much. Yeah, and there's no question about that. But yeah, listen, you want the kids to have fun, but it's fun winning. Winning's fun. So,
Did you turn yourself into like Will Ferrell there and kicking and screaming there? Is it quite there yet or no?
No, I haven't been that bad, but I certainly will say that I do get a little internally. I get intense. You know what I mean? Like I coached one. I have an older kid and I have 3 older boys, and one of them I coached their basketball team, and I got way too into it. And and this is like when they're 12, 13, something like that. But I'm arguing with refs, and I hate it. I'm like, I'm too competitive. That's just how I'm built. And so this is much better because this is much lower. I would be a terrible actual coach of any, because I get too wrapped up, and right. So anyway, but it's been fun. It's been fun, and my daughter enjoys me being a coach, and so it's been great. It's actually been really special time.
I know, Coach. I got myself in trouble years ago when I was watching my daughter play. I kind of gave the old, well, I could coach this team better than that. And the next thing you know, someone's like, why don't you? I'm like, well, maybe I will. And the next thing you know, I'm coaching the team for the next couple of years. But before we get into the football talk here, I just want to give a quick little shout out to a good friend of the fantasy football community here, Dominic Petrello. You might know him as @EnvisionFF. He lost his vision due to diabetes here. And Bob Gilchrist is a good friend of the show, does the graphics for us. His daughter has diabetes, so this really touches close to home. They're doing a bunch of best balls out there to help raise money for Dominic there. And he's been recently, something else has come up in his health with the diabetes. So we want to make sure we give a shout out to that, those best ball leagues that are going out there to help a member of our community. If you guys are watching right now, make sure you go sign up for a couple of those. I think even Andy Singleton has a PayPal set up for him. I think Lewis Glover there at Fantasy Football Down Under, he's got some best balls going on. So make sure you check that all out as we get into this type of season here. So again, that's Dominic Petrello there at Envision FF.
Envision, by the way, is spelled E-N with an E. Yeah, he's a good dude, and what I admire about him is he's a grinder. You know what I mean? Like he's I think a lot of people in his situation would give up, or certainly wouldn't try something as challenging as trying to make a career in fantasy football, which is challenging to begin with, right? You okay over there?
Yep, just dropped my light, but it's all good. Go ahead.
All right. Well, you're outside. What do you mean in the light?
I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, man. You said something
All right,
very
fun,
important.
it's all right. Anyway, so he's Dominic just keeps on grinding and does not let disappointments in his life get him down and or to quit. And so I admire that significantly.
Yeah, I don't know, me on a personal level, if I was in his situation, I don't know if I'd have the positive outlook on life that he has all the time. He's always very positive on Twitter. He's always willing to listen to you and talk to you, and he always wants to be part of that community. So I make sure we get as much help for him out there as we can. Make sure we support him more than anything. So I just wanted to make sure we give that a quick little shout out here before we go on. And now we have to go into the contractually obligated part of the show where we have to talk a little bit of football. Recently, we just had the NFL draft, and Matthew, I think your Washington Football Club came out pretty good. What are your thoughts on their draft?
Yeah, I really like their draft. Look, I wanted them to go into the draft that unless a quarterback fell to them in round one, and I was hoping that maybe they would trade up for Fields as it seemed like he was dropping a little bit, and I actually kind of wanted Mac Jones. I would have been interested in Mac Jones. But assuming a quarterback didn't fall to them, I thought they did exactly what they needed to do. I thought, if you follow me on Twitter, heard me talk pre-draft on any of the podcasts that I do, we talked about the fact that, listen, they needed a linebacker, they needed some offensive line help, and wouldn't mind some depth in the secondary. And that's exactly what they did, right? I mean, so they go out and get Davis, who is – the other thing is that what they really wanted to do is just speed was really important to them. So, getting Jamin Davis from Kentucky, very, listening to Rivera and a lot of the Washington front office post-draft pressers, they talked about the fact that they were really impressed with his flexibility. They feel like he can play all three linebacker positions, that he's a very flexy, athletic guy, obviously a lot of speed, not a huge sample size of him being elite, just had the 1 year at Kentucky, but they did their research, and something interesting. He comes from a military family, his parents, and so that's something that always resonates with Coach Rivera. I know he feels like that that kids that grow up in a military household or have a military influence in their life, or work well in his format and work well in a team environment. And so Cosme, they think they're going to try him out at left tackle. They'll see, but he was highly thought of, and again, for an offensive lineman, he's very fast, and so that was a big piece of what they want to do. And then Diami Brown out of North Carolina, I thought was a steal in the third round. Like you think about the speed, right? You think about what Terry McLaurin can do, what Curtis Samuel can do, what Logan Thomas is really fast for a tight end, and now you add Brown along with Antonio Gibson, like. You've got speed for days. You've got some really nice speed at the offensive positions. And you've got a quarterback in Ryan Fitzpatrick who loves to chuck it deep, who's not scared to throw into a tight window, who's certainly not scared to go deep with the ball. And I think that having a quarterback like Fitzy, who's an above-average NFL quarterback at this point of his career, having a quarterback like that and who's mobile enough to get out on some bootlegs. And listen, he's not Josh Allen or Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson, but he's mobile enough, right? And so get him out on some screens and some bootlegs, and design some plays where, again, also you're sending all the guys down, and that's going to open up stuff underneath for whether it's Logan Thomas or Antonio Gibson. I think with that defense, their offense only needs to be competent, but I think they're going to have an above-average offense this year. Washington is, as long as health is there.
Always
I think
appreciate your football
Go ahead,
analysis. But for those of you who are used to joining our show and who have watched a number of these Behind the Grind series, you know that concludes our NFL analysis, and we move on to a fun part of the show where we get to ask some more personal questions to Matthew. You've already heard from Matt Donnelly, Matthew Berry, obviously. Also, of course, Major, who already had a tough life living in LA, is joining us from Hawaii. And then we've got Tara Roberts down there in the bottom, of course. And Matthew, they've got a lot of questions for you. I'll just start it off with this. We like the good way of getting to know our guests is to understand the type of music that they like. So not just necessarily the type of music you enjoy, but if you were a professional wrestler, or let's say a closer in baseball, something like that, and you had to be introduced to a crowd of people, what's the perfect intro music to introduce you?
Oh gosh, the perfect intro music to introduce me. I mean, I think you want something sort of upbeat, because the songs that I would pick aren't necessarily like if you're a closer in baseball, if you're a pro wrestler, you want something like really kind of right. But so I'd have to think on like what's like a really strong sort of kind of kick-ass song. I'd like some of the ones that immediately like what I mean, like one that strikes me is like Badlands. I'm a Springsteen guy.
Yeah.
I think by being like an over 40-year-old journalist, like I think I'm legally required to like Springsteen. I think we all do.
Yeah.
And being male especially as well. But like Badlands, especially like that, like if we could time it so that the minute I walk out, like it's the lyric that I'm gonna go out tonight and see what I got. That immediate lyric, like that would be pretty cool. I like. There's a Tom Petty song, I Won't Back Down, that I kind of like, that I sort of think, because, I'm a different sort of dude, and my analysis has been, is very different. My style is very different, and over the course of my career, I got a lot of pushback. Still to this day, I get pushback on sort of how I do fantasy analysis and how I like to present myself and my content. And so, despite being told many times, go away, no one's interested in this, I haven't backed down. Seems to have worked out so far. So that would be one. And then there's an obscure song that actually, if you listen to the lyrics of it, it's sort of depressing, but I like the theme of it quite a bit. There's a very obscure musician named Jude, Jude, who I'm friends with, and he was kind of a local artist in LA. He had a 2-album record deal. And he formed a group with 3 other singers called Low Stars, and they had one song. And their album was like in Starbucks, of all things. Like that was a big thing. Like they sold out music in Starbucks for a minute, and like theirs was the album they chose. Anyway, but they have a song, which Google this if anyone like. It's just a great song. It's like a very Eagles kind of 70s harmonies type song. It's soft rock, but it's called "Calling All Friends." And it's like the song literally starts, "I'm calling all friends and people I don't even know."
I like that you're in tune with. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so Tara, I was gonna say it's like I just if I was coming out, like it's just sort of like, come on, I'm not in this alone. I'm calling all friends.
Love it.
People I don't even know. I'm calling all friends and people I met on the way down. So again, it's sort of a depressing song because it's about a guy going, that he's reaching out for help. But I guess on some level, if you're going to be a reliever, if you're going to be a pro wrestler, like, listen, I need everyone, I need the crowd. Let's go. So there you go. There's some answers off the top of my head.
I love that you got so much thought around the lyrics specifically with it. It's very good.
Well, thank you. I'm a writer, you know what I mean? So words mean something to me, right? Words mean something to me. By the way, and as soon as we get off this podcast, I'm sure I'll think of like 6 other songs. I'm like, man, I should have thought about that song. I'm actually pulling up my phone. I'm actually now going to go to on the music now and think about that while you guys think about some other questions for me, whatever. But I'll just.
So let's think.
You know what? This one's probably an obvious one. I got 2 other ones. There's this. It's actually wasn't that popular a song, but it's been used in a ton of commercials, and that's "How You Like Me Now" by The Heavy. Okay. Right?
Yeah.
How You Like Me Now? Like it's just, like that. That's just like a great sort of kick-ass song that would work for everyone. And there's also a semi-obscure song. I think it's semi-obscure, called "Feel All Right" by Steve Earle, which I also really like that song quite a bit. Nice. I feel all right tonight, which is which would be apropos for wrestling or trying to save a game.
Yes.
I think it's the first time we've gotten 5 songs in one answer. So I'm picturing you coming down and going backstage and then coming back again. And then
well, listen, I'm an overachiever and I'm verbose and I write long. I do everything long. I write long, I talk long. I'm I'm verbose.
Love it. It's great.
Yeah. So that's just what the greats do. Let's get to know Matthew Berry. So we know Matthew Berry, the fantasy football media guy, the media extraordinaire. Let's get to know Matthew Berry, the football fan. So Tell us about what sports you played growing up. What was your passion?
So listen, as a little kid, I played, like most everything. Like I played soccer, I played lacrosse, played basketball for quite a while. I was a starting 5 on the my 8th grade team. But my big sport was tennis. I was actually a really good tennis player. From the time I was 10 until the time I was 18, I played tennis every day of my life. And I was ranked in the state of Texas. I grew up in Texas. And tennis is really competitive in Texas, as you can imagine, because you can play year-round. It's obviously a huge state. And so really, really, California, Florida, Texas, those are the big states for youth tennis. Certainly they were when I was growing up. And but I was pretty good. I was ranked in the state of Texas. I was actually, me and my doubles partner were really good, and we were I think 12th in the state of Texas for 16 and unders. I was good enough that I got D1 scholarship offers. I was the line of demarcation is where I wasn't good enough to play at a top 20 school. I wasn't good enough to play at Stanford or the University of Texas or Texas A&M or some of the top 20 at the time when I was growing up. Some of the top 20 tennis programs. So I wasn't good enough to play at a top 20 program, but I was good enough to play D1 college, and I was good enough to play at an elite program at D2 or D3. So that was sort of where I kind of netted out. And I guess my biggest claim to fame in tennis was when I was 16 years old, I played a kid named Alex O'Brien, and I lost him 6-3, 6-4, something like that. So I played him pretty tough, and I got 7 games off of Alex O'Brien, and Alex O'Brien ended up going to he was number 1 in the state at that point, or number 5 or something like that, highly ranked. He ended up going to Stanford, and he became at that time when he played for Stanford, he became I think the first player in NCAA history to win the singles, doubles, and team title in the same year. So Stanford won the team title, and he won the singles and doubles. Ended up I think. He was a pro for a while and made it to the quarterfinals of the U.S. Open one year, and that's my claim to fame. So I was pretty good, not great, but pretty good, and I did that till I was 18.
Favorite tennis player of all time?
Probably Bjorn Borg. I love Borg. Again, I'm older than you guys, so listen. I love Borg. I love Boris Becker. Just love the serve and just how powerful it was. So probably those 2. And I loved Martina just on the women's side. I loved Martina. He was just so money.
So I want to keep the rolling on the sports theme going on here. We're going to go to the combine. Normally we go with an all analyst type of combine here, but I want to do something special just for you. So you're going to the combine in Indianapolis, but you're competing against 90210's very own cast of characters here. We got Brandon, we've got Steve, we've got David, we've got Donna, we've got Dylan. Yeah, don't worry. This is what we call. Some people call this research. Other people may call this stalking to a point. But we've got all these cast of characters. You're going to the combine. You're competing against 90210.
You didn't mention Brenda. Are we pre or post Brenda? Which era? Is this Valerie Malone or is this? Are we doing Brenda Walsh?
We have to include Brenda, no doubt.
Oh, there you go. That's what I thought.
We're going to go. Okay, so we got them all. They're all going to the combine. They're all competing against you. Who's going to outperform who? We're going to go with 2021's version. So we're going to go with like Steve Sanders post Sharknado type style here. So he's in a little bit of shape here. He can work it a little bit. Who's going to wow the scouts?
I mean, what category are we? We're talking like 3 cone drills. Like what are we? Like what? Like are we like?
Let's go with the 40. Let's go with the 40 first. Let's go with the 40.
In the 40-yard dash, I gotta feel like David Silver. If you remember, David Silver had a season where he was on speed. He literally took speed. A lot of very special episodes. So give me David Silver.
What
about something like the bench press here?
Yeah.
Who's gonna rep it? David might be burnt out by now.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, listen, I guess I got to go with Steve Sanders there, right? I mean, because Steve Sanders loved his muscle cars, always liked being without a shirt on. I think feels like Steve Sanders would be the guy that, in terms of the bench press, that could, and he was always full of it as well. So he could press the most BS as well.
And is Dylan going to get knocked at the scouting combine because of his BMI being so low? Like, is he going to get the Devonta Smith kind of treatment?
I don't think so, because Dylan's the man. Dylan's the fucking man. So, you don't knock the man. Absolutely. just like Devonta Smith is just like, whatever. Like, you watch that kid play and you're just like, all right, whatever. I'm not worried about it, right? I mean, whatever. Kyler Murray was too short. No one's talking about that anymore, right? Russell Wilson was too short. No one's talking about that anymore. When Dylan shows up, no one's talking about anything other than the fact that Dylan is the man.
Right.
That's right.
And then one more thing here. We got the Wonder Lelic test here. Who's going to ace that? Who's going to score the highest in that of all these cast of characters?
Well, you didn't mention her, but I mean, obviously, Gabriela Carteris, who played. Why am I blanking on Gabriela's?
Andrea
Zuckerman. I don't know why I had a brain fart there, but yeah, Andrea Zuckerman, obviously. But of the people you mentioned, I'd probably say Brandon Walsh. But give me Andrea Zuckerman. You're talking about the Wonderlit. Yeah, obviously.
Nice.
Yeah, Matt. You spoke a little bit earlier about your unique style. And from the outside looking in, you're like one of the realest people on like in the entertainment business, period. Where did that style come from?
I agree with you, Major. Thank you.
Hey,
that's just a question, right?
Yeah, and what gave you that confidence to like do that on camera? Back in the day, it's kind of like today it's sports. You're doing that thing, but you're very unique in how you deliver
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Major, I really appreciate that. That's a really sweet compliment. Thank you. I try really hard, and it's a combination of a couple of things. First off, because any other way would suck. Like I don't have that, deep announcer voice, right? I just don't have that. Like, I do a podcast with Field Yates. Like Field Yates was born in a broadcasting studio. Like he's just like, and I mean this in the best possible way. Like he's just a robot. Like it's unbelievable how good he is as a broadcaster. And like, I'm just not. And so number one is like, so there's 3 pieces that I would say here. So number one is just like, necessity being the mother of invention. Like this is what I got to deal with, right? You play the cards you're dealt, right? Like I'm not getting by on good looks. So it's like, I'm just doing what I can. So number one, it's that. Number 2 is that I'm a massive fan of Howard Stern, right? I'm a huge Howard Stern fan, been listening, 30 years, 26 years, whatever it is. forever. And Howard is the king of that, right? I mean, Howard's the first guy that was just like, Howard burps on air and farts on air and like has conversations with his producer on air about what's going on. Like he's the realest guy ever. And he's obviously, he's talked about that a lot. And so his is a career that I've studied a lot, in addition to just being a fan of him and his content, just as he's a very impressive broadcaster and businessman in terms of things that he's created and the way he approaches content. And so I sort of, I've stolen a lot from Howard over the years and learned a lot from him. And that was one of the things as well. Is that, like, I'm a big believer in that that the audience will forgive almost anything as long as you're honest with them. Like, as long as you just sort of are, like, especially in this day and age, but even growing up, like, or getting in there, like, you're just like, as opposed to like being, Johnny Broadcaster, you're just like, yeah, I just screwed up. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I mean, like, here, like, whatever. I'm in my office and I'm in the middle of moving offices, so it's a disaster. So I've got it pointed up because I've got all the artwork down, and the only thing you can sort of see is, like, I've got some stuff my daughters, I've been taken down to the stuff that my daughters have drawn me, but, like, that's why I've got, like, this crappy background behind me, but it is what it is, right? And so that's another thing major, is that just trying to draw inspiration from Howard. And, the thing about Howard, whether you love him or hate him, he's Howard. Like, if you listen to that show, you have a real sense of who that guy is, both, the positives of him and the negatives of him. And so I thought that was an approach that I really wanted to try, and has been successful for me. And the third thing that I'll say is that when I got to ESPN, because there certainly was a moment where, if you looked at early tapes of me, there is a little bit of Johnny Broadcaster when I'd get on and you've got, you're on Sports Center and you're sitting there in a suit and tie, and somebody's like, go over, and you're just trying to be right down the middle. I had a conversation with Chris Berman, with Boomer, and I asked for his success. And he just said, he's like, here's the thing, talk as if you're talking to one guy. He's like, don't think about broadcasting. Literally talk as if you're talking. What I do is I just talk as if I'm talking to one guy at home, like I'm having a conversation in the bar. You know what I mean? With one guy. And so, and Boomer obviously has his own style. He's a legend. He's an icon. And so that was, that was also very instructive for me. So it's sort of those three answers. But I've tried very hard. And I think that if you're just sort of honest with the audience, understands and is accepting of that.
So let's dive into fantasy sports and kind of take it back a little. Tell us about the first ever league you were in.
The first ever league I was in, I was 14 years old, and it was 1984. So you guys can do the math there in terms of how old I am. 1984, there was a book called Rotisserie League Baseball that had just come out, written by the founding fathers. Rotisserie League Baseball, the best game for baseball fans since baseball. And Rotisserie League Baseball is what's known as fantasy baseball today. But it was written by a group of very talented writers who came up with this game. They used to meet they were like a guy named Daniel Okrent, who was a public editor of the New York Times and has edited many books. And so there are a lot of very literary types in this league. And he came up with the game, the idea of fantasy baseball, which he called Rotisserie League Baseball, because that group, his initial league, which formed in 1980, they would have lunch together every Thursday at a now defunct restaurant in New York called La Rotisserie. And so it was Rotisserie League Baseball. And anyway, and so in 1984, the winter of 1983, they published this book, Rotisserie League Baseball, describing all the rules of the game. And I was a nerdy kid. I loved reading books, and especially sports books, and I read everything I could get my hands on. And I read this book, and I thought it sounded so much fun. Wow, this weird new game. And like I told you guys earlier in the show, I'm a pretty good tennis player. And so I actually took private tennis lessons at a country club. And so anyway, I'm walking up to my private tennis lesson one day, a guy named Tommy Cannell, and Tommy's talking to his best friend, a guy named Don Smith. And they're talking in this weird language that sounds very familiar. And I walked up and it's like, you guys talking about rotisserie league baseball? And they're like, you've heard of it? And I'm like, yeah, you guys have heard of it? And they're like, yeah. And they were trying to form a league. Understand, this is 1984. Computers don't exist at this time. Like, forget the internet, forget phones. Like, not even like the only computers that existed were like the big stand-up, ones that you see like in old-timey science fiction movies, with the spinning, but they were going to form a league, a 10-team NL only fantasy baseball league, and they had 9 guys, and they'd been talking about who could they find for a 10th that knew this, that had heard of this weird game. And I'm like, so, I think we've all been there at some point where we just need one person, any person, to fill out a league. And so that was that. I said yes. And so that was my first league, 14 years old. And one of the real thrills of my fantasy sports career is that many years later, I ended up getting to do a fantasy baseball auction draft with Daniel Okren, with the founding father of rotisserie league baseball. And so I sat there with him and got to meet him and talk with him. I met him a few times over the years now. And it turns out apparently we were one of the first 50 leagues in America, one of the first 50 fantasy baseball leagues in America, because they had a thing in the back where you could send in to get your stats done by fax. Like, again, that's how long ago it was. Like, you get your they would fax you.
Send it by like pigeon or like what? You have to send off the.
I'm sorry, say that again, Major.
You probably had to send your draft picks in through like a carrier pigeon or what?
Yeah, basically close enough. Yeah, smoke signal. Yeah, so it was, but that was my very first league, Tara.
Very cool. Very cool.
I love that because we've talked to Bob Harris and Paul Charchian about the early beginnings of fantasy football, running it out of your apartment building, running it 1-800 numbers, fax machines, you name it, how it was originally all kind of done back in the day. So
legends, yeah.
It's fantastic to hear these stories. It really was like the Wild West when you first started getting 1984, early 90s, how these fantasy leagues all started. But one of the more impressive fantasy leagues I think I've seen is that Superheroes League. And probably more importantly than the Superheroes League itself is the trash talk that was going on between Pratt and Reynolds and Jillian there. I think she was probably even the best of the trash talkers, was she not?
My favorite trash talk video that I've ever seen by any person ever was last year and it's epic. Ryan Reynolds has done some amazing ones. Karen Gillan, who plays Nebula in the leagues, has done some amazing ones. But there is one last year from Pam Clementieff, who plays Mantis in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and she's in the last 2 Avengers movies that she did. That is unbelievable. Like, it's literally the most amazing thing. I've seen it 100 times. So just to sort of give Matt, so for people that aren't familiar, so I play in a league called the Agbo Superhero League. So it's been going on for 2 years. And basically the idea was, so Joe Russo is a friend of mine. Joe Russo, of course, of the Russo brothers, him and his brother Anthony, amazing directors. They own a studio called Agbo Films. They directed Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War, Captain America Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War. Amazing directors. They produce Extraction. And anyway, they're brilliant directors and writers and just amazing people. And so Joe and myself talking one day had an idea to do a fantasy football league that we wanted to play together, and we wanted to do it, for charity. And we thought we had this idea, the 2 of us, along with this guy Guillermo Lozano, who works with Chris Evans, and the 3 of us came up with the idea for the Agbo Superhero League, which was basically a league for charity. And the rule of the league was that you had to have appeared in a superhero movie to be in the league. Not having played a superhero, you had to have at least just appeared in a superhero movie, which is how I sort of weasel my way in. I sort of slide in under the radar, me and Joe, because both Joe and I had cameos in Avengers Endgame. And so, the idea that the theme of superheroes is obviously very important in Joe's life and trying to do better and make the world a better place. And so we thought, could we get our celebrity friends? And by our celebrity friends, I really mean Joe's celebrity friends. Joe's my one friend. And I latch onto all of his. and could we get our celebrity friends to play in this league with us for charity? And we got an amazing group. And so last year in the league, we planned on a 10-team league. We're like, well, me and you are 2. Can we find 8 others? And we managed to get 12 others. Like, that's how, it's amazing. But it's all the Chris's. It's Pratt, it's Evans, it's Hemsworth, it's Robert Downey Jr., it's Paul Rudd, it's Ryan Reynolds, plays Deadpool, of course. It's Simu Liu, who's in the upcoming Shang-Chi. Pom Klementieff, who obviously, as I mentioned, plays Mantis. Karen Gillan, who plays Nebula. Elizabeth Olsen, of course, Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch. She's in the league. Robert Downey Jr. is in the league. I can't forget RDJ. Mentioned Paul Rudd. There's probably 1 or 2 other people that I'm forgetting because it's 14. And then obviously me and Joe. And so Anthony Mackie. Sorry, Anthony Mackie's in the league. One of the things we try to do is, sort of talk trash. Ryan Reynolds sort of set the bar high and did this unbelievably filthy rant at Karen Gillan. He was just like, oh, I'm Canadian and I don't really want to talk trash at Karen Gillan, and then he just proceeds to like say the filthiest stuff for like 2 minutes straight about Karen Gillan. Anyway, if you can go to YouTube and if you just search Agbo, AGBO, Agbo Superhero League, a bunch of them will come up. Or if you just search my Twitter and use that hashtag, they'll come up. But a bunch of them over the last 2 years, and last year FanDuel came in as a presenting sponsor of it and put up $1 million in money for charity. So we all play for our respective charities, and I play for the Jimmy V Foundation for Cancer Research, which is great, and was able to raise $110,000 last year for cancer research, which is pretty awesome. So it's cool. It's like playing fantasy football, and it's a huge win all the way around, because it's like, first off, you've got huge stars playing fantasy football. That's great for our industry, just elevating it. When you see Robert Downey Jr. or Ryan Reynolds or Paul Rudd or Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, whoever, some of these massive stars talking about fantasy football, it's amazing, right? And then you go to and the fact you're raising money for charity and awareness for a bunch of different great charities, that's amazing as well, and it's also a lot of fun. And so Pom, just to bring it all the way back to your question about trash talk, Pom last season when we were playing, she was over in France filming the new Mission Impossible movie. And so Simon Pegg, who, is in those movies, her and Simon Pegg got together and they did a parody of a musical film, like a 50s French musical film. So she sings a trash talk song to the league in black and white in French. And it's you just have to watch it because it's hilarious. And then and then you have to watch it twice because the visuals are really funny and amazing. And she looks great and it's shot beautifully. It's clearly shot with a film crew. So the production value is off the charts. And then you watch it a second time just to read what she's saying in French. And it's hilarious because she's just completely going to town on Chris Hemsworth. And she takes shots at a bunch of others, but it's mostly just, completely crapping on Chris Hemsworth. But it's in French and it's in song and she looks adorable. And it's like, anyway, just Google Pom's name or Agbo Superhero League, like it'll come up, and it's literally like it's the greatest 2.5 minute trash talk video I've ever seen in my life. Like, it's unbelievable.
Matthew, I'd like to go back to something you talked about where you were there with Chris Berman and you were on the set and you were, kind of Mr. Robotic announcer man. And, some of that, I wonder if it comes from that the fantasy football industry was not what it is today, where, as you said, you've got the biggest superhero, movie stars in a league now. And I mean, there's fantasy analysts all over the place, a lot more accepted than it was then. But you were kind of that first guy that, had a big stage, and here we are, however many years later, and you're still here. So like,
you don't have to sound surprised.
No,
you don't have to answer that. Then I'd ask that with a question. Did you guys notice that? Hang on. Did you notice? Sort of like there was like a lift in his voice. It was like and you're still here.
Somehow.
There's
You know
a
what?
little bit of that, like haven't you taken the hint yet? Like what's like it? Like all right, old man, you did your time. Like chop chop.
It was almost like he was filmed in black and white and speaking French.
Yeah, I
and you just got
know.
that subtitle.
Yeah, exactly. Like I used to, like the old timey movies. I would just I just hold up, like right, like the sign.
Charlie
Yeah, right. Yeah. So tell me when you went to talkies, Matthew. Yeah.
Well, I for one hope that, I hope that in 20 years you're still here.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is probably the end of my career doing this dumb show, but so if that's what you were hoping for is just like killing my career, I think we've done it.
That's it. R.I.P.
Yeah,
Matthew Berry, talented Mr. Roto.
Exactly. Can't wait
Cinco
for
de
everyone to
Mayo,
get it.
2021.
I used to respect Barry, but then he went on some show and talked about, Donna winning the bench press or something. I don't know. Right. Yeah.
Cal, what was the question though? What was
I don't even know. Forget about it.
Oh my God, Barry, Nat from the Peach Pit totally would have won the 3-cone drill. What's going on?
Well, my main
Yes,
point
I'm
of
still
that
here.
was, you're still, so in other words, like you are doing something right. Like you have maintained the ability to adjust no matter what has come your way, because the industry doesn't look like it did when you first started. There's way more things. We've got TikTok, we've got Clubhouse, we've got, podcast at some point, like weren't even that big of a thing. And you and Nate and Pod Vader and all, you guys had, one of the first that were really successful there. And so just what was it like, I guess, navigating through all the different changes, and like, what have you learned in your journey here as a, just as an analyst? And
I think it's important to, try to, I think it's a couple of different things. Number one is I think you're always trying to push forward, right? And you're always trying to better yourself and not just do the same thing and not do, because it gets stale, right? And so it gets stale for me, and so I think if it gets stale for me, it certainly gets stale for the reader, viewer, fan, consumer, however you want to put it. So number one, it's that. But number two, it's also trying to be smart about what you do and how you do it and why you do it, right? You don't want to I tried a podcast, right? And I found that was pretty good, right? And that went well for me, and our podcast still does really, does huge numbers. It's a big success for ESPN, and I love my friends, the footballers, but they are not the number one fantasy football podcast. I will put our numbers up against theirs, but they do a great job. And so we're doing, so I think it's important to just sort of kind of push forward and try different things. So to your point, TikTok comes around. Should I have a presence there? What should that presence look like? Or Clubhouse. Like I've tried that. Being familiar enough, and also not trying to do, do what you're good at and not what you're not, right? And so, let's see if I put this a different way, because this answer isn't going great. Here's what I'll say. There's an interview that I once, we were talking about music, right? Your first question off the top was about music. And one of the things I didn't mention is Jimmy Buffett. I'm a massive Jimmy Buffett fan. I've been to, 35 shows, something like that. And I've been lucky enough to meet him a few times, and massive, massive parrot head. And I remember reading an article about, and by the way, Jimmy Buffett is like one of the most successful musicians of all time. I mean, it depends on how you define success, right? I mean, but his career, he's been playing for well over 40 years. Like his longevity is, insane. He plays the sold out crowd. I mean, obviously no one's going to concerts anymore, but pre-pandemic, and as soon as we can go back out to concerts, he'll sell them out again. He plays the sold out shows every year and can do it till he dies, right? It's a massive fan base. He's made, he's literally a billionaire with a B. And I remember reading an interview with Jimmy, and what Jimmy said is, he said, I'm not the best songwriter. I'm not the best singer. I'm not the best guitar player. He says, but what I'm really great at, what I do better than I think anyone else in the world, is being Jimmy Buffett. I think that's so smart and really insightful if you think about it. And so just as, Major was asking me early in the show about, trying to be real and stay true to yourself, right? So like what I've tried to do throughout my career is when I do anything, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Clubhouse, whether it's anything new, right? Trying to like sort of change my style, but it's also trying to be true to who I am. And, listen, there are people that are better at stats than I am. Like I'm pretty good with stats. I'm not Mike Clay. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm pretty good at watching film, but like, I'm not Matt Bowen, who does a great job for us, who played safety for 9 years in the NFL. Like that guy can break X's and O's like anyone. Like, so I'm good at watching it, but like, I ain't Matt Bowen. And like, I have legit sources in the NFL. I have legit players and coaches and front office people that I text with regularly. So I have good sources, but I ain't Adam Schefter. Like, I'm just not, you know what I mean? And so, but what I'm really good at doing, I think I'm better at anyone in the world at being Matthew Berry. Right. And so I just try to be me and be me as good as I can, if that makes any sense at all. And so like at ESPN, my plan has always been try to approach as the company has asked me to do more and more things. I've tried to think about what that medium does well and what I can do well in that medium, right? So this is maybe a more in-depth answer than you wanted, but so with a column, right? With a column, you have time. Right. I mean, like now everyone's like, oh, I want quick. But I'm lucky enough that I've been doing it long enough that I've trained my audience, or people expect a long article from me. And so I have time. I have time to explain my thoughts, and I have time to let you know me. And so I always write that article, the story at the beginning. And when I meet fans out and when they recognize me, they never say, oh my God, thanks for Darren Waller 2 years ago, or thanks for Logan Thomas last season, or whatever. They never say that. They always say, the story about your daughter breaking her arms, or, the bullying column, or the story about when you met your wife, or the story about your father-in-law, or your heart attack, or whatever. Like, it's always that's always the thing that comes up. And so that is very specific, right? Because there's a chance I have time, and it's a one-on-one relationship with the reader. And so I've got time for them to sort of get to know me. But when we started the podcast, like you sort of have that time, but you don't, right, on some level. And so the thought process that I started with that was, I remember we first had a meeting where to start a podcast, and I said, this is literally what I said to them. I said, my idea for a podcast is, I don't want it to be nerds talking to nerds. I said, our best chance at success in making this broad is we should literally do a morning radio show. We should do a wacky morning. We should do a morning radio show, but we just happen to be talking about fantasy football all the time. But it's a morning radio show, and people, and so there's a lot of sort of rules on a morning radio show in terms of people have nicknames, and obviously I'm a Stern fan, so you mentioned Pod Vader, like our producer became a character, and so on and so forth. And now there's a lot of podcasts that use comedy and that make it a bit and that kind of stuff. But I feel like we were the first to really do that. And so then it comes to Fantasy Football Now, and what's that? Okay, that's Sunday morning. That's Sunday morning. You've got your lineups, and so that needs to really be meat and potatoes, right? That is like, okay, we're done dicking around all week. Now we've got to set our lineups. Now we need to know who's injured, who's in, who's out, right? If I'm tuning into that, what I want to know is tell me who to start. Tell me who to start. Tell me who's injured. Tell me who's inactive. Give me meat and potatoes. And so that's purposely sort of right down the middle. And I have a great relationship with Field and Stefania, who I do the show with. And so we have a lot of fun because we're all good friends in real life, and we've worked together for a long time. But that's, meat, very specifically meat and potatoes. And so, and then the fantasy show that I do for ESPN Plus, I've written about this before, but they came to me and they said, what do you want to do? And they said, have you ever seen Mad Money with Jim Cramer? And I said, yes. So they just said, we like that idea. We like the idea of you talking down barrel, like directly to a camera about fantasy football. That's all so Norby Williamson, who's my boss, and candidly, who's everyone's boss here at ESPN, very graciously said, listen, I have two rules for you. I want it to be that. I want you to be standing and talking to a camera. He goes, and number two is it can't look like anything else on ESPN. It's got to look different. Other than that, go to town, do whatever you want. And so it was important for me because there's only so many players you can talk about, right? And so I wanted it to be and if somebody was going to read my column and listen to the podcast, I wanted the show to be a completely different experience, because otherwise then you're just regurgitating the same thing, right? And and so it was suggested to me that I get a female co-host, and I said no. I said I want Daniel Dopp. He's got a big bushy beard, and he's got full sleeve tattoos, and he's got a nose ring, and his ears are pierced. And I said, that guy doesn't look like anyone else on ESPN. And he's a good friend, and we have a good chemistry from the podcast. He's Secret Squirrel on the podcast. I said, that's who I want my sidekick to be. Because that's different. You know what I mean? And having a female sidekick is sort of the expected, right? And then I said, and by the way, I want puppets. And they're like, puppets? And I said, and a talking robot. I want puppets and a talking robot. And they're like, what? And I'm like, puppets are funny, man. But what I'm secretly thinking is that, ESPN, we're owned by Disney, we're a conservative company. I'm like, I can get away with more with puppets. There's some stuff that you can say with a puppet that you can't say. And I just think puppets are really funny. Again, we go back to Howard Stern. Stern had puppets, Muppet Show, loved the Muppets Show as a kid growing up, loved Pee-wee's Playhouse. As an adult, love Avenue Q. Like, puppets are funny, like, if you do them right. And so, we think we've done them right. And, we just decided to do a show that was going to be about, as we said, our motto was, if you give us 20 minutes, we promise to make you a much smarter fantasy football player and a much dumber person. And so that's sort of the mantra. And by the way, my phone is dying, so I'm like, sorry, my computer is dying, so I'm looking for my charger here. Anyway, but that's sort of
that's how you've stayed around, puppet.
That's how I've stayed around, and trying to keep my content different and interesting, and also most importantly, keep myself interested. So that keep myself interested, because if I'm interested and I like it, I sort of think that, I'm not a weird dude. Like, I mean, all right, I'm sort of weird, but like, I'm not super weird, and I'm not super weird. And so the idea is, if I think it's funny, chances are other people will think it's funny or interesting or smart. And so just try to sort of, please yourself and stay true to who you are, and hopefully you find an audience. And I've been lucky so far that that's happened.
I like the message there that you have about touching on new forms of media. You mentioned Clubhouse and TikTok and how, moving forward with those things, but making sure that when you're going to those things, you're not changing who you are at the core. You're still keeping that same person. So I think that's something, really unique that you have there that is probably helping you, stay at the top of the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I just, like, with TikTok, like, for example, I'm not particularly good on TikTok, and I don't have a lot of followers. I'm trying to figure out a TikTok strategy, and my current idea, which I still haven't had time to implement, is just like my 9-year-old daughters. I have twin 9-year-old daughters that are on it, and my idea is just to do everything with them. Like, my TikTok strategy will just be like stuff that 9-year-old girls thinks is funny, but it'll be about fantasy football. Like, I'll just do asking them what are the TikTok trends that are going on that I don't know. Is there a slime video I can do with fantasy? I don't know. But that's how I think, right? It's just and just own the fact that okay, I'm not a typical TikToker, right? And so just sort of, own that and make fun of myself. Again, just trying to be honest, right? Like, people get, if I try to get on there, like, oh, I'm a cool TikToker. They're like, you're an old. And, and so just sort of, kind of owning it and making fun of yourself is a way to go.
Yeah, Matthew. We all really appreciate the FF follows every Friday. Do you have any advice for those of us trying to make it in the industry? Minorities, women, or any advice you have for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think. Listen, I started that because Major, if I can be super real here, I started that for a couple of reasons. Number one is I think, and it's awful that this is the truth, but I think this past summer, and I think starting with George Floyd and moving on from there, I think this summer was a real wake up call to a lot of people that not that anyone thought that race relations in the country were perfect, but I think it was a wake-up call to realize, like, oh, it's much worse than we ever thought. And by we, I guess I should say, like, middle-aged white men, or myself. I'll just say myself. I don't want to speak for anyone else. I'll just say for myself, right? That, like, certainly was aware there are issues, but, you know, that was real eye-opening to me, and I think others as well. And so my thought was, how could I, in my own small way, because the people that tune into me for fantasy football advice, not to be lectured to or anything like that. But how could I, in my own way, do something to try to help, right? And I'm a big believer in that, that our industry, meaning the fantasy football industry, the fantasy football industry, is way too white and way too male. And that's not, I don't know that that's anyone's fault, but it's just, I think it's way too white and way too male. And we're starting to see a lot more voices emerge, which is great. But so how could I help try to elevate some of those voices? And I'll be honest, and the reason why I say it's too white and too male, Major, if I can be honest with you, is that when I started that, and I started saying, like, all right, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a Follow Friday, and I'm going to do it. It's only going to be women and people of color. Like, that's going to be the idea, is that I just want to try to elevate those voices, because I think we got enough white dudes, right? We need more diversity in our industry. We need more diversity in general, but specifically in our industry. And I started to run out of people. Just being super honest, like, because I didn't want to just be like, oh, you're a woman, let me say Follow Friday. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I wanted it to mean something. I wanted to be, all right, let me follow this person. Let me think they're smart, their content is funny or interesting, or like, but I, enjoy following them, and let me, and so I did that, and I started in about a month, and then like a month before I started them, I was, I was sort of researching, for lack of a better phrase, and after a while I ran out of people, and so I had to change it to under 30,000 follows. And so it's worked out, and I still try to, focus on women and people of color, but, it's awful. And so, so my question to you, I can give general advice about how to make it in this industry, which is a lot of different things, which is, number one is, as you say, embrace all the different mediums and go where the audience is, right? So, like, there probably is somebody that's like has a huge fantasy following on TikTok, right? Or YouTube, right? I mean, I think there's a and Clubhouse is just starting. Like, can you build up a following there, right? Like, whatever. On Twitter, I've got 1 million followers. On Clubhouse, I have 3,000, right? It's pretty easy to beat me on Clubhouse. I mean, and so, like, but it's going to take a while to work up to 1 million on Twitter. And so that's one area, but also just engaging, right? Just like being active on Twitter, on social media, going on people's podcasts, inviting them on yours, right? And so you guys invited me on this podcast. I retweeted it when I came on. I'm going to follow all of you. I don't think I follow all of you. I will after this podcast, and so, I mean, but that's, that's a form of networking, right? And so networking, and then also producing good content. I'm a big believer in, I think everyone needs to answer this question for themselves. What is the value proposition of your content? Because there's a lot of us doing fantasy football content. So why is somebody tuning into you versus why is somebody listening to this podcast or reading your article or, following you on social media, whatever it is, versus everyone else that they could? You know what I mean? Like, I know what my value proposition is. You know what I mean? And again, and it goes back to some of the themes we've talked about on the show, like trying to do what you're good at and not what like if I suddenly tried to be like all super statty and analytical the way that Mike Clay is, that wouldn't do well, because number one is I'm not as good as him, and there's other people that are very statistically minded that are great, but that's not me, right? So then I'm going to be just a bad version of them, and so the people that really like hardcore statistical analysis are going to be like, well, you ain't Nate Silver or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and so I'm not winning that fan base. And the people that like the stuff that I do is just like, oh, where's Matthew Berry? Where's the stuff I like? And so figuring out what your value proposition is and just trying to hammer that and be as good as you can at that. So that's what I would say in general. But Major, I'll ask you, since you asked me the question, I'll ask this back to you. You tell me, how can we get more diverse voices into our industry? What can we do? What can someone like I do to help the cause? And what can we as an industry do? Because I think it's an important question, and I don't honestly have the answer beyond doing what I'm doing, which is I'm trying to promote people's work who I admire, and who may not have as a big a platform as I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you're doing is a great step. That's a step in the right direction, like highlighting people so your fan base can like latch onto those people. But to me, I just had this conversation with a friend the other day. It seemed like in our community, we have to see it to be able to do it. Like, no one's jumping from the free throw line until we seen like Jordan jump from the free throw line. You get what I'm saying? So if we see someone on ESPN talking fantasy football, that shows kids and everyone else like, oh, I don't have to just play football. I don't have to just play basketball. I can be a nerd and crunch numbers and do all that stuff as well and just talk fantasy football, ESPN as well. So my biggest thing is seeing we have to see it to be able to do it. You know what I mean? Like, just talking about it is not enough. I think seeing somebody in that position, like if we had a Matthew Berry, kids can see that and be like, oh, I can do that with my life, So I think that's the biggest part. But you promoting people, I think that's the step to get to where we need to be.
Yeah. Well, whatever I can do to help, I'm happy to do so. And there's certainly a number of people that are doing great work as well. And so it's my pleasure to highlight them, and hopefully others that have nice sized platforms will continue to do the same as well.
Yeah. And I'm on Clubhouse, so if you want to give a follow on Clubhouse, I'll appreciate that.
I will absolutely give you a follow on Clubhouse. The one thing I will ask, because this is one thing, because sometimes I'll have people that that will either DM me or tweet at me saying like, yo, how about giving me a follow or something like that? And I'm always just like, you don't ask, man. Like, don't,
just like let it happen.
Let it happen. Let the magic happen. Like, or whatever. Like, let me, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I got you.
That's for everyone. It's
well, Matthew, I'm glad you jumped on. You came on here. We talked about some good stuff here. I want to be respectful of your time here. I know you're a busy guy. You got 100 other things to go on. So for Major and Tara, for Calvin and myself, I just want to make sure we say thank you very much for taking this opportunity, taking this time to spend with us this afternoon. And as we head out, one of the common questions I usually ask our guests is, if you weren't doing the fantasy analyst, what would you be doing? And I was able to grab this video. So as we sign off, I'm going to play the video and we're going to walk away. So for Matthew, for Calvin, Tara, Major, myself, we're gone, and enjoy.